This week, I walked into a prison, and what struck me the most wasn't the guards, the bars, the locked doors. It was the patterns, the stuck patterns. There were men and women that you could see the pain that they've lived in their lives. You can see the anguish of knowing their mistakes and their consequences for those mistakes and how it affected their families and how it affected them and their freedom. You could see all of that. You could feel it, the shame, the guilt, the anger. There was also something deeper, this sense that they don't belong out there. They don't deserve to do that. That's when I realized it's not just about the external bars. It's not just about the punishment and getting justice. It's about our inner prison. Where do we belong? Do we punish ourselves endlessly for the things that we do? We know this time of year, especially with Easter, that the God that we know leaves the 99 for the one. Is the one that special? Probably not, but to God it is. And so if we're that one that constantly messes up, constantly disappoints those around us, constantly land in toxic relationships, or never live up to your own standards or anyone else around you standards, what part of us says we want to improve, we want to learn, we want to have peace, we want to succeed, but then the inner part of us that is in prison says, no, you can't. You're going to fail. Look over and over again. It's in your blood. It's what you've always done. What makes you think you can change now? It's hopeless. Don't even try. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You try, you fail. Of course I failed. Look, that is a prison without the bars. How many of us hold the keys to that prison, yet we refuse to open the cell? We refuse to leave the cell. How many of us have said it over and over? I'm gonna try. Is probably the worst sentence you can say because it leaves room for failure. And failure is not the end of the story. I am going to succeed. And you may say in your mind, no, you're not. But here's the thing. Create a bridge. There's another one of my videos that goes into this very thing. You may need to create a bridge and say something that's in between those two things, such as every time I try, I get better and better. My path to success gets stronger each time. You say things like that, you're on a forward momentum path. Failure, it's a speed bump along the way. We won't be deterred by a speed bump. We won't say, forget this path, there's a speed bump on it. You're not gonna say that. You're gonna say, I'm the one sheep. And you know what? If I'm important enough to leave the 99 faithful to come after, then it's enough for me to keep going. I'm gonna unlock the bars, I'm gonna walk out, and I'm gonna take charge of my life. And I'm gonna do it one phrase at a time. If I need 1,000 bridges to get to the other side, I will build them and I will walk across them. And I can do that. So start with your first one. Every time I move towards success, I get closer. Keep going. Sometimes where we are, even if it's in a painful, toxic cycle, sometimes that's a comfort level. Sometimes that's an upper limit. We end up in these patterns because this is where we think we belong. This is where we've always been. This is where my family is. This is where my friends are. We get ourselves stuck in these loops and patterns, but it doesn't have to be that way. We are in charge of our own cells. We are in charge of our own bars. Something in us is saying we can't handle different. Something in us is saying we deserve what we have. We're not good enough to change. This is how life is. This is how it's always been. There's no opportunities for me. We may say those lies. We may believe them. We may get stuck in those patterns as a result. I looked at those men and women in the prison, and you may be wondering, why did she go into a prison? I joined a prison ministry in my church, and I started this past week. So it was my first experience, and I did more observing than anything else. And towards the end, I got more comfortable having these discussions where people needed to vent or they needed to sort of just, hear an outside perspective. And that's where I stepped in. But I did a lot of listening and observing and sort of learning the ropes first. It was the same story over and over. It was a pain. There was toxic environments. There was a challenging life circumstance, lack of resources in some way, and most of all, a lack of hope. And what ended up happening is they just got into the same pattern of pain. They would go in, they would get into a great headspace, gain momentum for their lives. They would get hope, a regular schedule in there, regular food. They had regular counsel, limits. They had boundaries. They had support, even though obviously that's probably not where they would have chosen to be. Consciously, this was an environment where they likely felt safe, maybe not like a failure. They're among others who have similar struggles that maybe relate to them. Suddenly, they're not down here anymore. They're here in their lives. They were able to get to a place where now they can go out. Well, then they go out again and goes right back down. All of a sudden, there's expectations, there's temptations, there's toxic relationships and patterns, and you fall back into the same inner speech, self-sabotage. I don't belong here. I'm not good enough. I can't do it. I can't last. I can't withstand the pressure. They end up right back. Where do they end up right back? Where they feel safe, where they feel like they can relate, where they feel like they can get a hold of themselves. And that's not what you want. You don't want to feel safe out here. You want to feel safe in here. Because if you can do that, if you can forgive yourself, if you can move past the obstacles in your own way, you can open your own inner jail cell and let yourself out, then suddenly that pours out of you and your outside environment reflects it. And that's what you want, isn't it? You want to be free inside and you want to be free outside too. And you want to have the strength inside to be able to make those good decisions, keep those healthy patterns, withstand those temptations, because of all times of the year to remember how special we are and how much we mean to our Creator, it's this time of year. So I want you to think about this affirmation today. I am not my past. I am not my patterns. I am worthy and deserving of love, grace, and forgiveness. Have a great Easter.